in you. You're my hiding place. You're my resting place. In your arms I find all I need for life. You're my hiding place. You're my refuge. You're a shelter. You're a shade from
Kevin, getting all this right, yeah? All right.
All the warts.
Mark,
Test, 1, 2, test, test, test. Test, 1, 2, test. Test, test, test. All right, so,
you're loud enough I can hear you.
we need,
You're gonna do it.
did I miss the opening prayer and stuff?
No, you're doing it. We didn't do one.
We didn't, I'm doing it?
Yeah.
Awesome, okay, all right. You there? All right, we're good now, all right. Heavenly Father, we ask that you just watch over us today and everything we do, that you guide us in our lives, Father. We want to give thanks to you for the many blessings you've given us in the past, the one that you are no doubt providing us today, and we have no doubt whatsoever, Father, that you have many more blessings in store for us as long as we walk in your light. Amen. Amen. First of all, announcements, I guess. We have tickets for the 22 pistol back here for sale. They're $5 a piece, or 5 for 20. All the proceeds, all of it goes to Kobe's Cancer Fund. So if you can, please get some of those. And if you have somebody you know, then get with somebody. They can get some tickets if you think you can sell some. That'd be a great blessing too. Just trying to get all the money together we can. We are going to do a benefit in January if everything goes as planned. But in the meantime, we're trying to do this to get a little money to get to and from West Texas and so forth. So last week, we talked about getting out of God's way and letting God do what he does. You know, normally when I pray for my sermon for the next week, I'm usually hit with a verse that I build a sermon off of, or I hit with somebody, you know, when I'm praying for it, I picture somebody in my mind, and I figure out what's going on in their life, and we build a scripture around that, a sermon around that. This week, God just told me James, the book of James. And fortunately, that's a small book, you know. It's only like 3.5 pages, 5 chapters. And so I'm going to try to kind of sum up and go through all of it. First of all, everybody know who wrote the book of James? Anybody? James, very good. I was afraid somebody was going to say Paul. Then I was just going to quit and go home. Paul, there you go. See y'all later. Too late, but I will see y'all 3 after church. You know, I say that because so many books. I believe Paul's attributed to 13 books of the Bible, maybe 14, depending on who you ask. So he wrote a lot of the books of the Bible. So just because the name of the Bible doesn't mean that's, well, you know, Corinthians, we know that's not the person Paul wrote this. Okay, so forth. But James is really, you know, I've told everybody before, Revelation is my favorite book in the Bible. But James is a really good book, because James doesn't beat around the bush, okay? James tells it how it is. Now, there's several Jameses mentioned in the Bible, and we're not talking about the disciple James. The book of James was written by Jesus' half-brother. Can you imagine the sibling rivalry that went on there? Jesus is your half-brother? Man. Yeah, you know, that song, I Can Do Anything You Can Do Better, comes to mind for some reason, I don't know. So, and James, you know, he really had a hard time with it at the beginning because James grew up with Jesus. And, you know, Jesus originally was just a normal boy. And then all of a sudden, he starts claiming to be the Son of God. And no doubt, James kind of thought, you know, he probably thought, we need to get this dude, get him a padded cave. You know, he's claiming to be the Son of God, here with the power of God. You know, and of course, you know, Jesus had to one-up him with that whole resurrection thing. You know, so after that, James kind of figured out what was going on. James is such a powerful book to me. I can say it's short, but James, Like I said, he's a straight shooter. And James, the book of James is about life and the role that faith plays in our life. He reaches into the dirty little bag of human tricks that we play on ourselves. He tells us how to act as Christians, and he tells us how not to act as Christians. And he draws a line between life and faith and how they correlate with each other. He tells us that we don't have the ability to stand alone against life and the tribulations and the trials that we're going to face in life, that we can only do it through trust and faith in the Lord. It's faith that allows us to do God's work, not just words. The problem with Christianity in the world today is so many of us claim to be Christians. We speak the word of Christ, but we don't do the word of Christ. So we're going to go through the sermon I wrote is basically on James, the first book of James. The first chapter of James. But we're going to kind of go through all of it since it's such a short book. I couldn't really do a series on it. You know, you can read the whole book of James in like 15 minutes. Even I can. Maybe not out loud, but I can if I'm in silent. On a good day. James talks about what a Christian has: the trials, the tribulations, temptations, joys, wisdom, and freedom. Religion and faith, the marks of a true Christian, are what they and we do, or what and do we have them? He's asking this. The marks of a true Christian are what and do we have them? The book of James is a practical book on ethical living as opposed to religious doctrine, like we find in Romans. It's a short, concise book of practical thoughts on Christian living. And you start in verse 1. Some of the translations in the book I'm in right now, the Bible I'm in right now, reads bond servant or slave of God. He begins the letter with great humility as a man, wholly devoted, obedient, and loyal to Jesus Christ. And then he gets right to the point. Dr. Tony Evans had a translation of the verse that says, "My name is James, Jesus is Lord, now let's go get it." James gets right to the point. Chapter 1, he gives us 5 things that the Christian has and challenges us to live them out. Christian life, verse 2 says, Christian life, we will have trials and tribulations. The Greek word here implies trouble or something that breaks a pattern of peace, comfort, joy, or happiness in someone's life. The word face, as in you will face trials, suggests that one is surrounded by people, objects, and circumstances that will try one's faith. James didn't have to tell us that life includes trials and tribulations. All I have to do is look around this room, and I'm sure I can point to each and every one of y'all, and each and every one of y'all can tell me the trials or tribulations that you have been or are going through right now. And I'm sure that it's not going to end there. If you're not having problems today, get ready for tomorrow. Because they're going to come. He doesn't say you might have them. He doesn't say there's a possibility you'll have them. He says there will be trials and tribulations. Disease, illness, financial, family struggles, child custody battles, and problems at work. We got the trials and tribulations covered, but James focuses not on the event themselves, but on our attitude in the midst of them. This is where a lot of us get lost. You see, the second thing that Christians should have in their life is this attitude of joy. Not just simple, quiet, little joy. The word here means ecstatic joy. As if it isn't enough to have these problems, But now we have to have them and be happy, happy, happy about having them. It's not exactly what James is calling for here. We need to be careful and understand his words. He's not suggesting that some kind of masochistic happiness in the hurts and losses of our life. He's not suggesting that we manufacture some kind of other worldly, phony sense of joy about our problems. We need to dismiss our modern notion of joy. What we think of as joy, we need to get that out of our minds, because he's not talking about worldly joy. Nobody's going to get up and throw a party because they lost their brother or whatever, their son. Nobody's going to throw a party because it happened. That's not the kind of joy he's speaking of. The kind of joy he is talking about is the kind of joy that understands sacrifice in the present life for the attachment of the future good. It's a joy that is fundamentally beyond ourselves. It's a joy that is a result of a deep sense of being in the presence and will of God. It is found in a sensitivity and humility. It is found in a sensitivity and humility before God. Don't pretend to be happy in adversity, but have a positive outlook, because we know that the trials and tribulations that we're going through in our life will let God lead us through them. And turn hardships into times of listening and learning from God. See, that's why when we go through hardships, when we go through these struggles, if we will rely on our trust and our faith in Jesus Christ, rely on Him to carry us through these troubles and tribulations, then we become stronger. When you're a child growing up and you first learn to walk, and you keep falling and stumbling, you get stronger. Your legs get stronger. You get to where you don't fall. You get to where you can run. It's a simple trial and tribulation as you're growing up, and they get more and more harder as we get older. But you have to remain in that faith, and you have to keep struggling through it, knowing all along that you're not in it alone. God, Jesus Christ, is standing right beside you, walking through that with you. If I ask you, would you like to go through some of the trials and tribulations of your life again? Most of you would undoubtedly say, no way. Wouldn't do that again for anything in the world. But if I ask you, are you grateful for that difficulty accomplished in your life? A lot of you would say, I wouldn't trade those lessons and the character developed in those trials and tribulations for anything. I grew up in Oak Cliff. We went to school, a junior high school that was called L.B. Stockard. I started there the year that they started desegregation. It was about a month into school, and then all of a sudden, half our friends were gone. And we had all these other people that we wasn't used to being around with, wasn't used to seeing, because we didn't have black people in Oak Cliff at that point. We had very few of them. Obviously, they were scared to death, and we were scared to death. We didn't know anything about each other. What we did know were things that had been put in our head through other people, news and so forth, that, scared us. So they didn't have a chance, we didn't have a chance. There was fights every day. Gang fights every day. People getting hit with chains, beat with chains, stabbed every day. I don't know how many times my poor mom got a phone call from the principal's office. I was in trouble, I know, I was set up. I was innocent, no doubt. I think the one time I wasn't innocent, the principal told me to get over it. I've gotten away with enough that I can accept the punishment for this one. And a lot of people said, man, don't you wish you would have gone to another school? At the time, I would have loved to have gone to any other school. But I wouldn't trade those 3 years of my life for anything in the world. I learned so many life lessons at that school. I became so strong from that school. If I had grown up in Red Oak at that time, and then been put in that situation, Lord help me. You know, I was blessed that I grew up in that area and I had the skills to be able to deal with it. And when I didn't, I learned real quick. You learn simple things like don't walk between classes alone. You know, you learn other little lessons like when they come up to you, grab the one running his mouth and let's go with him first. As long as I get him, because I'm going to lose anyway. All little life lessons, but it's strength that you learn and lessons that you learn through these trials and tribulations. Anybody on the outside would have said, heck no, I ain't going to that school. I went there with pride because I survived it. We consider it joy because we know that when the tough times come, the end result is going to be strength, character, maturity, and faith. James tells us that God looks upon the person who has endured the trials and tribulations with favor. So consider it pure joy, brothers, when you face trials of many kinds. Then James goes on to say, if that isn't enough, the Christian batteries?
Gosh, man,
It's time to shut up.
Thank y'all for coming today. Oh, no. There's those trials and tribulations we're talking about, so I get to yell a little bit. And James goes on to say that it isn't enough for Christians. We'll also have temptations in life. He cuts right to the chase on this one. He says, temptations are not from God. If I had a dime for every time somebody come to me and said, man, God has tempted me and tested me today, Pastor. If I had a dollar for that, I'd have a pretty nice stash somewhere. You know. God does not tempt us. Evil tempts us. God doesn't tempt anybody. James is comforting that, confronting that though, and he says that temptation does not come from God, but it comes from evil desires within us. It begins with a slightly naughty kind of thought. And this is what I talked about, you know, reaching into our little bag. James is talking about all the little things that we have, that we struggle with, of our own evils. It says it begins with a slightly naughty kind of thought. I can tell a little lie this time without getting caught. No one will notice it. I can take a little peek at that magazine on the rack there with the brown wrapper on it, and nobody will know it. What will it hurt if I share a little gossip today? Have a little too much to drink this time. What will it hurt? Temptations attracts attention. Entices one to try on a little sin. It persuades one to approach the edge of sin, and then it lures by means of tantalizing bait to try sin on. Opportunity may knock once, but temptation bangs on your front door forever. One of the things he's speaking about right there is not only are you putting yourself and you're flirting with disaster and your own temptation, it invites the same thing from others. If one sees you and says, yeah, he got a little drunk this time, but he's okay, he's still a good guy, then when they're out and they're wanting to do something and they get ready to get a little drunk, then it's okay, I can do it because he did it. It was okay. I was talking with a lady the other day at work. She's come in with her son. She said that her and her son had been fishing because he was looking at the fish over there. And he said that they had been fishing and they caught over 50 fish an hour. I was like, man, how many times have I gone fishing and sat there for hours and hours and I didn't got a bite? So I asked her what kind of bait they were using, and she laughed and said, sometimes we use bread. Sometimes we use crickets, hot dogs. It really didn't matter what kind of bait you used because the fish were primed already to bite. And the place that they were fishing was a private pond on a man's land. And he stocks it every year. And after stocking the pond, the man begins going down to the dock every day and throwing out a little bit of food for the fish. Soon the fish come to expect the food. More and more fish are coming to the dock as soon as he walks up to them. You know, they can hear it. And they know they're fixing to get fed. So all the other fish are learning from these fish. Now you get all the fish in the pond coming around this dock every time they hear somebody walk on it. And then when the time is right, the man casts out a little food, and then he throws his baited hook out in the water at the same time. The fish bite the bait and they take the hook without even realizing what is happening until it's too late. They're caught being reeled in, and they're the main course of somebody's dinner. That's what sin does. It teases, it entices us to take a little bite. Just about the time we get comfortable with that little bitty bite, that little peek behind the brown cover, or that little bit of gossip that we spread, or that little bit of talk when we talk about somebody, it throws the hook in, and we're caught. We're giving birth to sin, which can become full-blown in our lives. And sin does what? Sin becomes death. Full-on sin breeds death. Man is responsible for the temptation of sin, not God. It's our evil desires and our lusts that are inside us that are responsible for the evil and temptations that we face. See, the deceiver is a very smart man. Or very smart, whatever you want to call it. He's not going to come to Deborah and tempt her with beer if he knows she doesn't like beer. See, he knows what's in each one of our hearts. He knows what's inside of us. And that's what he gets and tempts us with. He's not going to tempt me with what you love. He's going to tempt me with what I love. What I think I want. What my desires and lusts are. James says that the fourth thing that a Christian has is God's wisdom at their beck and call. If any of you lack wisdom, he should ask God, that's what it says, verse 5. And if he or she should pray to God for wisdom, Eugene Peterson says that James' nickname was Old Camel Knees because of the thick calluses that he built up on his knees from the determined prayer that he did constantly. I was talking to a guy, and some of y'all friends with me on Facebook, you've seen that I put how blessed I felt this week because twice this week people came into my shop that I was able to witness with. They asked about the church, they asked about me, they asked about things, and then they talked about their own lives. So we got to sit there and witness with each other. Big guy came in. And he asked about the church, he asked about the Cowboy Church and this church. He never been to either one, but he wanted to come. He said, I have an anger problem, Pastor. He said, I'm learning to grasp it. He said, but I haven't been able to forgive. So we talked about forgiveness and the fact that it's not an option to forgive, it's a command to forgive. Okay? And he said, he was having a hard time doing it. We talked and I explained that again, that forgiveness is not for the person. It doesn't help the person you forgive one little bit. It doesn't change your life one little bit. It doesn't help them with God one little bit. It only helps you. It's only about you. He said, I used to be a cage fighter. He said, I learned to channel my anger through the cage. He said, the hardest thing I've done so far in my life was bend the knee. He said, I prayed on and off. He said, but the hardest thing I ever done was lower myself to the ground and pray to Christ for salvation. To pray to God for help, strength, courage. He said, that was hard. It's hard for me. But that's what God asked of us. See, I told him, I said, the reason it was hard is because when you went to your knees submitted yourself. You submitted yourself to God. You turned yourself over to God. You said, God, here I am. I'm weak. Take me. That's hard for a big man. Regardless of his stature, that's hard for a big man to do. Because we're wrapped up in this world about all being strength, macho, strong. Oh, you know what Tim says. Not this Tim. Tim's. I can't tell you what this Tim says. But he did it, and he said, you know, at that time, Pastor, he said, my whole life has changed. He said, I still have anger problems that I'm dealing with. He said, I still have forgiveness problems that I haven't been able to do. But he says, I now know I'm a Christian. He said, now every day I know I'm a Christian. When I wake up, I know I have God by my side. I have Jesus with me. Because of that day when I got on my knees. He said, the light was turned on. A whole new thing, a whole new being appeared inside of me. We call it the Holy Spirit. When you're tempted, when you're facing trials of life and tribulations that are sure to come, ask God for wisdom. He's going to give it to you in abundance. God is generous and a lavish giver when He is asked without doubt or wavering. Can't just ask. You got to know in your heart. You got to believe it, trust it, know it's going to happen. You got to know that if you truly turn it over to God, it will happen. And it will. Maybe not in your time, but it will happen in the time it needs to happen. The doubt that James is talking about here is not the sense of questioning, confusion, or uncertainty, but the indecision that hesitates and doesn't want to rely on God or God's will. It's an indecision. It's a wavering. Do we trust Him or do we not? Can I really say, okay, God, you take this, and then me just forget about it and trust in God to take it and deal with it, heal it, fix it? It's hard for us to do. It's a doubt that delays action in the face of what one knows he or she should do. God benevolently grants what we need when we ask with single-hearted devotion. That while it sometimes falters, it is essentially constantly true to God. Wisdom begins with a healthy sense of fear and respect for God. And it brings understanding of God's purpose and plan. It gives determination to one's life according to God's perspective for His way. It's always the best way. Then it goes on and talks about the poor and the rich in these verses. He isn't referring to monetary means, but righteousness. James is using a perspective metaphorically that was popular in the first century of post-exilic Judaism, whatever. That perspective equated the image of wealth and wicked, unrighteous, while poor meant pity in God's wisdom. He was not intending to say being poor is a blessing while influent is a curse, while being influent is a curse. Affluent, excuse me. He was saying righteous living in God's wisdom is better than the greatest wealth of the world. And here's a really interesting thing. In verse 19 and 20, most time preachers interpret this as referring to a personal relationship. But I don't believe that's what James was saying. I mean, it's good in human relationships for us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. But the verb and sentence structure here suggests that James is referring to what he has mentioned before in the chapter. That being quick to listen, slow to anger, and slow to speak is what man's to do when hearing God's wisdom. Because when we hear things that God wants to do, sometimes we'll say, no, I can't do that, man. You know, I can't quit my job. I make $100,000 a year there. I can't quit my job and become a pastor. How would I live? I can't quit my job and start going to prison and start talking to people all the time. That doesn't pay my bills. I can't give up my law practice and start doing free work for people. That doesn't pay my bills. Yet God's telling you to do that. That's what He's telling us. Be slow. Slow to speak, slow to anger, and slow to action. When we let God's Word challenge us instead of trying to make us make it uncomfortable and fit to our lives, when we let it push us beyond the limits of this secular world that we live in, it may trigger a sense of anger that wants us to push away God. I've seen it many times. People quit church. People quit serving God. They quit reading their Bible. They quit praying because they didn't like what they heard, because it angered them. We deal with it all the time when we're preaching in the Bible. I guarantee you, no matter what your problem is within yourself, it's in this Bible. And when the Bible preaches on that, when the pastor gets up here and he gets on that book, it's offensive to you because you know he's talking about you. Okay? We don't want to talk about the adulterers. We don't want to talk about the lusters. We don't want to talk about the drunks, the dopeheads, the homosexuals, the racists. We don't want to talk about that if that's us. See, we don't want to hear that. I don't know how many times I've seen people get up. They walk out of my church. I've seen them get up right after this and walk out. You know, they're all friendly before the sermon. They left. Didn't say bye, nothing. Just walked right by everybody out the door. I've seen it with that church. I've seen it with every church I've been in. What he's saying, be slow to think, be slow to speak, slow to act. Realize that God is speaking to you and accept what he's saying and go on with it. Use it to your advantage because that's why God's given it to you, for your advantage. Christians need to put away all the filthiness, wickedness, and receive the teaching of God that God gives us and take it deep into our roots. Have you ever considered what you do that is different from non-Christians in the last week? Let's say, in the last 24 hours, what did you do in your life that a non-believer wouldn't do? So I gave money to a friend to help him support the American Cancer Society. Great, but atheists do that all the time. I didn't yell or fight with my family yesterday. So what? I know a lot of good families, good parents who are non-believers. The difference is, as a Christian, we do what we do isn't because a friend asked us to. It isn't because a nanny on TV touts self-control and discipline over the family. As a Christian, we should do what we do all for the glory of God. To point to God, to lift up his name. The Bible's clear on it. It says, when you do charity, when you do something to help somebody, you don't do it for recognition. You know, I'm glad that Jerry Jones and Mark Cuban gave them $1 million each to the Dallas Independent School District. But I've been a lot happier if they wouldn't have put it out publicly. Because they didn't do it to help the school district. They did it to help their own image. Not God's image, their own image. I've made the same mistake. I see sometimes we do things as a church or as a ministry, as a motorcycle ministry, we do it and it gets put on Facebook. And it bothers me. There's 2 reasons it's put on there. One of them is because we want people to see that you need to be helping, you need to be doing good, you know, for other people. But at the same time, it's drawing attention to us and what we're doing. So I always try to be very careful how that's put on there and how I respond to it so that they know it's done for the glory of God because God asked us to do it, because that's what He wants. If it was me, the name of the church, the name of the people involved in it, doing it, the name of the ministry would never be mentioned. Just mention the act of what happened. That's okay. That's the way it should be done. The imaginary mirror, the image mirror, in verse 25, stresses the difference between the existing person and the ideal in Christian living. The ideal is rooted in God's wisdom and it brings freedom. Verse 25 says, living and doing the law brings freedom to give as God created us to live. Verse 27 says, freedom on behalf is in such a way as to please God by demonstrating concerns for others first and foremost, and then by living the lives of holiness free from the pollution of the world. A real Christian lives a life that has trials and tribulations, and he takes joy in the temptation because of wisdom of God. Because of the wisdom of freedom that God has given and knowing. Stop it, Chris.
Come on, carry yours.
Ponytail next week, I guess.
Man bun.
Man bun.
Cut it.
Man bun, no man bun.
No.
I'm going with the man.
No.
Oh, we done say
There's a poem written, Butt Prints in the Sand. Y'all ever heard that poem? And y'all heard Footprints in the Sand, right? Butt Prints in the Sand. One night I had a wondrous dream. One set of footprints that were seen. The footprints of my precious Lord, but mine were not along the shore. But then some stranger prints appeared, and I asked the Lord, what have we here? Those prints are large and round and neat. But Lord, those are not. Those are too big for feet. He said, my child, he said in somber tones, for miles I carried you along. I challenged you to walk in faith, but refused and made me wait. You disobeyed, you would not grow. You walk of faith, you would not know. So I got tired and fed up, and there I dropped you on your butt. Because in life there comes a time when one must fight and one must climb. When one must rise and take a stand, or leave their butt prints in the sand. See, we all love the original poem, Footprints in the Sand. We all like to see ourselves in that poem, walking with the Lord. But the real question of James is, are we really learning to walk with the world? Lord, appreciating and living all that Christian life has, or are we merely deceiving ourselves and leaving butt prints in the sand? Go on with the whole book of James, and it's just so profound, the things that he talks about. He talks about, let me just close this. Let's go straight to the book. What time we got, Chris? Anybody? Chapter 11? Praise God. Praise God. All right, whatever.
my roast is burning.
Shouldn't have put it on. Blessed is a man who preserves under trials, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. See, God promises prosperity and happiness to his Christians. He didn't promise it here on earth. He didn't promise wealth. When he speaks of prosperity, that's not the prosperity he's talking about. He's talking about we win because we win if we do the walk of life, if we talk the walk of life, and we walk the walk of life in Christ now, then we win the crown in the end. That's what God's telling us. He's telling us to hold strong through the hard times. to keep faith in the hard times, to keep faith and trust in the face of disaster. Even if you die in that disaster, as long as you kept your trust and faith, then you won the crown of life. You will sit next to Christ in heaven. That's what he's telling us. He warns us in this book so many times, so many things. I guess I could have done a whole sermon on, deal. Talks about the tongue as a fire. So much easier to tear somebody down in order to raise yourself up. If you call yourself a Christian and you're slandering somebody, if you're tearing somebody down, if you're gossiping bad things about somebody, let me tell you something, you're not a Christian in God's eyes at that time. You're doing the work of Satan when you do that. The old saying that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Throw it out the window. How many times today we see on the news kids kill themselves because of words on Facebook or words on whatever these kids get on, Instagram and all that. My wife knows, she's a kid too. What words do to people cannot always be fixed. I've seen marriages destroyed over one fight. One sentence the woman said to her man. One sentence the man said to her woman. It never came out of her head again. You can hurt somebody, cut somebody, and say something so bad that every time they get mad at you, that's going to come into their head. You can literally destroy somebody with your words. The other side is, our charge as Christians is to build them up. Take somebody who thinks that they're not anything, thinks that they're down, that nobody loves them, and your words can build them up. Your words can let them know that they're loved by Christ. They are a son or daughter of Christ. Simply our words and our actions can save lives. More importantly, it can save souls. And that's what we're here for. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the word today. Father, in closing, I want to ask for a special favor. A special prayer, Father, that we're going to put up right now over the people. I know I have in my heart we're going to do an altar call real soon. Father, this is just a general altar call like this, coming through you, through us, to each and one of us here that needs it, Father. The healing they need for their disease or their sickness, Father. The healing they need for their strength and their wisdom. Whatever's going on in their life, Father, we're being attacked so bad by Satan right now. And I know that with your help, with you beside us, and us keeping our faith, Father, we're praying that you lay our hands on us right now. You send your angels to stand beside each and every one of us. Father, we pray that we don't leave footprints in the sand. Amen.
Amen.
That's all I got, Ernie. Don't forget to get the tickets in the back. Remember, we got December 6th, the church dinner. Is it the 6th or the 7th, whatever it is. 6th, December 6th. They said, I thought it was 7th, but anyway, whatever it is. That night is church dinner. Saturday night, yes. Saturday, yeah. Thought so. Okay. December 7th, 6 o'clock, be here. We're going to decorate the church. We're going to decorate the church. Yeah. Yeah. I'll be going on a toy run. We will have service. Derek is going to preach that week. So everybody be here. I'm going to talk to him. If we maybe try to get started a little early, because I know some of us, like Kelsey and the kids and stuff, man, if we could start a little early, like half an hour early that day, and get out of here by 10:30, then y'all could rush out to 287, and get you a place on the side of the road, and let the kids watch all the motorcycles come through there and stuff, Santa Claus on the bike, and it's pretty cool. So maybe we can start early that week, and get out of here early that week, so the ones that don't ride can get out there and see the parade. Awesome. Thank you.